Hello, hello. How's it going, everyone? As always, I am live on two places, so if you see me kind of looking back and forth, it's because I'm always like trying to figure out where exactly to look at these things. So I'll just keep alternating between the two as long as I remember. Awesome. Let me just get my notes up here. How's everyone doing? I'd love to know, as we are just waiting for a few people to come in, just what your thoughts are about this. And you don't necessarily have to share with us, patient numbers or whatever, or even that you're struggling, but just maybe some of the thoughts you have around patient numbers and how it makes you feel and what your experience has been with it. I think it's helpful to hear from people who are both maybe less listening to this live, but who are on the side of like, I have enough patients, and this is how it feels. And then also on the side of not enough patients, feeling like practice is too slow, too quiet. And I've had both, not in my own practice. My own practice was only the the not so many patients, but yeah, I've experienced both. And one thing I will say is it was quite a strange thing for me to experience, and we'll go into a few of these now, but I very much explained the fact that I wasn't busy in my own practice. I very much explained that as like, well, I'm clearly not good enough at what I do. Clearly, other people are just better at this, and clearly I just suck. um, and it was quite a sort of weird thing to then suddenly be in other people's practices, and I was busy there, or being in employment and I was busy there, and almost having to somehow now explain it differently in my mind, right? Because then obviously my mind didn't go, oh, well, now I'm busy because I'm such a rock star and I clearly am like the most amazing clinician ever. Of course, my brain didn't go there. But yeah, so it's interesting just to see like how we explain these things, where our brain goes, and we'll go into that a little bit now. So I'm going to go just into a few like reflection questions, and some of them might be not relevant to you and you can just skip past them, and others might be like, oh my gosh, I feel like you are attacking me personally. And we can explore both. Okay, cool. So for those of you who are not familiar with me or joining for the first time, I'm Sarah. I'm a health and career coach for clinicians, and this is, I kind of think about it as like they are clinicians who are like burnt out and unfulfilled on both ends of these spectrums, right? Of the spectrum, both ends of the spectrum. So we have the clinicians that are really seeing like so many patients, they're overwhelmed, they are exhausted, they just like cannot keep up with the volume of patients, it feels exhausting. And then we have on the other extreme of that, people who feel like I'm barely seeing any patients, or I'm not seeing the amount of patients that I think I should be seeing, or feel like I would be actually growing as a practitioner. So that can also make you feel, ironically, also exhausted. It can sometimes lead to a feeling of being bored. It can lead to a feeling of, feeling like I was talking about not good enough, or feeling like an imposter. Those things can be heightened when you're not seeing many patients. So there's kind of two ends of the spectrum, and they tend to present quite similarly, weirdly enough. So just know that the people on the other side of that spectrum of like a lot of patients are also not enjoying that. Not everyone, of course, but just knowing, I think it's good to know that just having a whole bunch of patients is not going to suddenly miraculously make you feel better, make you feel more worthy, make you feel like a badass clinician, all of those things. So all of the things that we sometimes think of that fixing, it doesn't really. So that's why I advocate so strongly for doing like the I want to say the inner work, because it genuinely will follow you along. It will follow you to the next career that you decide to do, if that's what you're contemplating. It's going to follow you along to when you are seeing so many patients. It's going to follow you along to like the next place that you move to and all of those things. So I think a lot of the time we try to solve it with those kind of more external things, and it doesn't really work. Okay, cool. So here are some of the reflection questions, and just also a reminder to just slow down, be with where you are right now, and just start there. I saw someone's kind of very simple definition of self-compassion just being like meeting yourself where you are. So we're going to meet you where you are today. I know that it feels like you just want to skip ahead to where you're busy and you have all the patients and all of that, but I promise you this work is really worth doing. So here are some of the things that you can start exploring. So when we think about, I don't have enough patients, right? Let's think about, how do you know? Like, not enough for what? Not enough to meet the goals that you set? Did you have specific goals for your patient numbers? Is it not enough relative to how you perceive other people are doing? Because some people build a practice. Some people will build a practice that they genuinely feel like, this isn't me, this isn't what I wanted. Maybe they just grew exponentially and they are stuck in a practice that they didn't even want. I've seen that in clinicians. So, and the other thing, I've done this as well. Like, when we are not doing well in our practice, we feel so ashamed about that we tend to exaggerate how we're doing when other people ask us how we're doing. So basing it off of how other people are doing is always kind of a rocky road. And other people just might have a different idea of what they want. Some people have different values to you. Some people have a different version of what successful looks like. Some people have different goals, right? I really found that I didn't have a very strong desire to measure myself according to my financial success. And everywhere I looked, that was how people were measuring their success. And it didn't resonate with me, but I thought that that's what I had to do. I thought that that's how I had to be. So often we are like measuring ourselves against other people when we either don't even know how they're actually doing, when we don't know what the long-term effect is of how they're building their practice, and also we don't know how different we are in terms of goals and values, etc. Is it not enough because it feels like you should just be doing more? Right? Is that how you're defining it's not enough? Right? I just have this feeling like I should be seeing more patients. There's no like actual number, right? It's just like a feeling of I should be doing more, right? And I really want you to hear this, like that feeling doesn't go away. We always feel like we should be doing more. Even if it's not necessarily the number of patients, we feel like we should be doing more for those patients. We feel like we need to, we need to be doing more in our lives. We need to be contributing more. We need to be impacting more. So that feeling of I'm never doing enough doesn't go away just because you now have more patients. So I really want you to hear that. So we're just going through like, what are you defining not enough through? Like, is it your goals? Is it how others are doing? Is it how you feel you should be doing? Is it just to like cover basic expenses, right? Like, is it purely a financial thing of this is what I need to do to just pay for my practice to be surviving, and I'm not making that, right? Is it, and this is an interesting one, like, is it that it's not enough for you to fully commit to your practice? So what I mean by this is like, we almost have one foot in, one foot out, and we're like, I need the practice to first like kind of show me that it's going to be successful before I really go all in, before I commit to it. And ironically, that kind of feeling is like the exact things that are going to build your practice require you to be fully behind it, fully committed to it. And I don't mean by that that you have to be like reckless with your finances and make no backup plans or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't have to be reckless. It's just that when you are almost like asking your practice to show you that it's going to be successful before you actually commit to it, ironically, that's when we don't actually create the practice that we want to. So is it not enough to fully go all in into your practice, right? Is it not enough to feel like you're doing well, feel like you're worthy, to feel like you are good as a practitioner, right? What are you using that not enough as? And we'll go into that a little bit more now. And then based on this, like, not enough, right? If you've realized, like, okay, I'm basing this is not enough to on something that I don't actually believe in, or like, oh, that's true, I didn't actually set a goal, I just, like, in my mind I thought, when it's enough I will know and I will feel differently, right? So if you've realized that your not enough was kind of based on something that you don't necessarily want to, think about what would be enough then, right? Like, if I said to you, do you have enough patience? And you said, yes, I have enough patience, right? Like, what would that be? How would you know when you have enough patience, right? So it's kind of a reflection on the other question, right? Like, what are you basing the not enough on? And how would you know if it was enough? Because we always say these things like, oh, I don't have enough patience, but based on what? Okay, so that's the first, I know it's like a group of questions, but under the heading of like, not enough for what? How are you defining that? How do you know that it's not enough, right? How would you know if it is enough? The second group of questions is kind of along those lines, but what are you making it mean? So when you see, like, let's say you just took that number of patients that you saw, like, let's say in a week or in a month or whatever, and you just thought of that number, what thoughts come to mind? What do you interpret that amount of patients to mean for you, about you? What do you think it means about your patients? What do you think it means about your future success or your future patient numbers? So let's think about, like, what are some things that we could make a certain amount of patients mean about us, right? And that's kind of like I was mentioning now. We can make it mean that I'm clearly not a very good practitioner, right? Like, I'm clearly not doing enough, or I'm clearly not very competent. If I was, I would be busier, right? Like, are you making it mean something about you as the practitioner? Are you making it mean something about patients? Like, patients clearly don't value their health because they're not booking appointments with me, right? Or follow-up appointments or whatever it is. They don't care, they're not taking responsibility. Think about how it feels, how it would feel as a patient on the other side for a practitioner to look at you and other people that have booked and say, this is not enough. I need more numbers, right? Like, remember that every single number on your of your patients is a real person with a whole life. And when we start to see people as just like numbers that we judge as like, well, that's not good enough, feel how that feels. What are you making it mean about your future success, right? So if I have X amount of patients booked for this month, right? Am I making that mean that, well, clearly I'm never going to be successful. Clearly I'm never going to grow. I'm never going to have enough patients. Like, what are you making it mean about, like, almost taking what's happening now and saying, well, it's clearly going to be like that forever. Like, this feeling of permanence about your situation, rather than seeing it as this is just one of the stepping stones along the way. So looking at what are you making it mean? If you had a full schedule, maybe even had like a waiting list of patients, what would that mean to you? What would you now suddenly believe about yourself as a practitioner? Right? Like, this is what I was talking about of, like, it's so weird to think that I was the same practitioner when I had no patients as when I had a really fully booked schedule of patients. It broke my brain a little bit because I had explained the fact that I wasn't busy as, I wasn't a good practitioner. So when you do have that full schedule, what do you think that's going to mean to you? What is it suddenly going to mean about you, about your success, about patients, etc.? And then the last question on the sort of area of what am I making it mean? So let's go back to that, you see your amount of patients for the week or the month or whichever you're looking at. What else could it mean, right? As an alternative to whatever you're making it mean, right? That I'm not going to be successful, I'm clearly a crap practitioner, I am, patients don't take responsibility for the health. However, you are sort of making meaning around that arbitrary number, right? What else could it mean? And let me ask you this. Have you built a successful business before? Because I for sure had not when I started my practice. So one of the things that it could mean is I'm figuring out how to build a business, right? It could mean, yeah, this is pretty much like a normal human part of building a business. Sometimes it's not as busy as you thought it was going to be. Neutral. Doesn't have to mean much, right? All it means is that I'm human and I'm building a business for the first time and I'm figuring it out. Okay, cool. I mean, even going, I'm sorry, my brain's going even further in that direction. Like, it could even mean like, oh, this is so awesome. I have like a whole bunch of free time that I can use for doing X, Y, Z. Right? Like sometimes we can make a good thing out of something that our brain immediately wants to go to something negative about. Okay. The third one is, do you even want more patients? If I was on this call when I had my practice, I would have felt called out by this one. But let's think about it. I mean, it sounds a bit weird and obvious. Like, of course I want more patients. Like, I'm trying to grow my practice. Okay. It's like, are you really? But here's what I mean by this, right? If we are already feeling exhausted and overwhelmed, maybe you have some shit going on in like your life, maybe you're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff, right? Sometimes we perceive more patients as just like, oh my gosh, I cannot handle that right now, actually. Even though I'm saying like I want patients because I want to grow my practice, part of us is resisting that growth because we just need to be less overwhelmed and exhausted. So this is not necessarily like a, woo-woo like energy thing, although it can be if that's what you want it to be. But it's more like if you think about the things that would grow your practice, there are going to be certain actions that require you to be fully behind it. And when you're not fully behind it, you're sort of half-assing some stuff, or you are not quite taking the actions that you want to be taking because you're so exhausted, or the kind of mood that you have when you're around people and you're talking about your practice is not like, oh my gosh, yes, come and see me. It's like, I'm so exhausted. But you can come and see me if you really have to. I'm not saying you say it in that particular way, but that's sort of like the way that you're talking about what you're doing has a certain amount of energy. And when your energy is low, we can all pick that up, right? It's very easy to pick that up. You can tell the difference between a practitioner who's like so excited and energized by doing the work that she does versus a practitioner who's already overwhelmed and exhausted and is like, please, like I don't need any more patients, right? So being overwhelmed and exhausted is just one of the reasons why we actually subconsciously don't want more patients. Another reason might be maybe you're unsure that this is actually what you want to be doing. And whether that means your like entire career, like you actually don't want to be doing this career anymore, and subconsciously you sort of like have one foot out the door already, or just the way that you're doing, you don't really stand behind. Like you've just sort of created this practice that you feel like, okay, this is kind of what I see other people doing, and this is what I sort of feel like, you know, a practice looks like, but it doesn't feel like you. It doesn't feel like you don't tell people about it in the way that you would something that you're like incredibly excited about and think like, oh my gosh, you have to experience this. Like that is not the feeling that is behind you and your practice, right? So either the way that you're practicing or sometimes even just the career itself. Sometimes we're unsure whether this is even what we want to be doing. And so we kind of have the gas pedal on for our practice, but we also like pressing the brake. Another reason you might actually not want more patients is because this is kind of going back to the earlier, like defining things for yourself, but sometimes other people have sort of defined success for us and we don't actually want that form of success, right? So maybe you don't want to be seeing X amount of patients, but you've been told that that's, you know, how many patients you should be seeing. So maybe you don't actually want more patients but you just feel like you should have X amount of patients, right? So that's maybe one of the reasons where you sort of subconsciously actually don't want more patients. Okay, cool. So that's the third question. Do you even want more patients? And really getting honest about that, getting honest about where maybe that is true, that you are not actually wanting more patients. Okay. The last one is, what happens to your idea of like, this is not enough patients, I should be seeing more patients, all of that. What happens to that narrative when you think about this as your life's work? Right? Like, this is my life's work. Because for me, what happens is the timeline becomes less important, right? Like, there is no timeline of, I have to have this many patients by this amount of time. Like, this is my life's work. Like, I am happy for this to take years and for me to slowly figure things out and to get clearer on what I believe and what my philosophy of my practice is, and getting creative with it, navigating all these questions about it, right? Like, if that is my life's work, the timeline just becomes so irrelevant. Maybe external measures become also less important, right? Things like finances, things like patient numbers, all the external things that maybe other people think should be important to you. When you think of it as, this is my life's work, how does that change? Maybe when you think about, this is my life's work, you actually think, oh, hell no. I do not want this to be my life's work, right? That's valid too. That's information, right? So if that's where you're going with it, then think about, okay, why am I doing this if the thought of me doing this as my life's work is terrifying? And I don't mean terrifying in a good way, that's good, but terrifying in like, oh hell no way. And I don't mean that that you have to be doing this in exactly the way that you're doing it for the rest of your days. That's not what I mean. I just mean creating this work, creating this career journey is my life's work. Figuring out all these things is my life's work. I don't have to do it today or tomorrow or next week, right? So think about what comes up for you when you think about this as your life's work. What changes? And I just want to round off, it sort of relates to this last point, but just also wrapping up this discussion is, think about, I actually posted this quote today. I have to see what it actually, because it's like an old English. But it says, let him who would move the world first move himself. Let him who would move the world first move himself. It's by Socrates. So the idea is that we're focusing on ourselves first. We're focusing on like our internal alignment with what we are doing, and then success, patient numbers, however you want to define that, success is almost like just the byproduct of that. Yes, you can have success without having that internal alignment. Some people do, but we can't have a business that really is fulfilling and that doesn't burn us out without having that. So I kind of think about success as a byproduct. There's also lots of research that shows that happiness and flourishing, or a state of well-being, actually precedes success. So that comes before success. And we often think about it as the other way around, right? I'll be happy when I've achieved XYZ. I have a certain amount of patience. My practice is busy, etc., etc. Then I'll be happy. Then I'll feel accomplished. Then I'll feel, confident and a sense of self-worth, right? But I want to say those things come first. Those things come before success. Those are like the ingredients for success, which is really cool because we get to focus on us. And then the impact comes from there. Helping people comes from that place. Having successful practices comes from that place. So focusing on like, what does it take for me to truly flourish, to thrive, to be happy, to have well-being? And how can I focus on that and trust that that is going to result in success, right? Or whatever, how the like general definition of being successful, achievement, etc. And then also thinking about the internal alignment. So thinking about when I am so 100% behind what I'm doing, when I'm excited to tell people about what I do, when I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to experience this, it's so amazing, right? If that's the way that I feel about what I'm doing, that is so different. Think about the experience of going to those two different practitioners. The one who's like, I don't know if this is what I want to be doing. When I get a certain amount of patients, then maybe I'll like really fully commit to this work, when the practitioner is asking you as the patient to validate them, validate their self-worth, validate their success, validate their sense of self. Right? Think about how different it is to see that clinician versus a clinician who is like excited about her work. Again, is excited about her work, who is like, this is what I want to be doing, who is like excited to tell you about what they do. Like, think about how different that is. So thinking about the internal alignment of like, this is like, all of me is behind the work that I do, and you can feel that, right? You are going to create the success as kind of a byproduct, rather than trying to go the opposite way around and saying like, when I have that, when I've created enough patients, when I'm fully booked, then I will be happy, then I'll enjoy what I do, then I will be fulfilled, and then I will, commit to my practice 100%. So just thinking of like the internal creating that external. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you found that really helpful. Let me know which one of those questions you really resonated with and maybe felt like a little bit personally attacked by. That's not the intention, but sometimes when we ask these like deeper questions, it can feel like that. So please let me know. I'm really curious to know how you're feeling in your practice and what you've sort of reflected on with all of these questions. Have a great Friday, and I will chat to you guys soon. Bye.